Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
As the hospital's automatic doors hissed open, I staggered inside, clutching the baby close to my chest. My clothes were wrinkled, my hands shaking from both the chill of the early morning and the strange fear twisting through me. I felt eyes turn toward me, a young girl barely 12, holding a baby wrapped in nothing but a thin, faded blanket. A nurse gasped, her voice low. Good heavens, is she holding a baby? Before I could answer, an older nurse with sharp eyes but a soft expression hurried toward me, her movements brisk yet cautious, as if she sensed the fragility of the situation. Sweetheart, she said gently. Are you all right? Is the baby all right? I managed a nod, though I wasn't sure if it was true. My head was spinning, my thoughts a blur. I don't know what happened. I stammered, my voice barely audible. I just woke up and he was there in my arms. The nurse's brows knit together in concern as she guided me to a nearby bench, her hands steady on my shoulders. What's your name, honey? Miriam. I whispered, still clutching the baby as if he were the only thing keeping me grounded. Another nurse came over, her voice low as she murmured to the first one, We need to get Dr. Hardy, and should we call someone else? Yes, tell him to come right away. The first nurse replied, then turned back to me, her voice softening. Don't worry, Miriam. Dr. Hardy is very kind. He'll know what to do. As she spoke, I felt my grip on reality slipping. I barely knew where I was, only that this baby, tiny and quiet, was somehow a part of me now. In some strange way, I felt responsible for him, though I couldn't remember how or why. A few moments later, a tall man in a white coat appeared, his footsteps quick but controlled. He crouched down to my level, looking me straight in the eye. Miriam, my name is Dr. Hardy, he said calmly, his tone grounding. Can you tell me a little more about what happened? I took a shaky breath, my voice a mere whisper. I don't know. I just woke up with him. I didn't know where else to go. Dr. Hardy's gaze flickered with something unreadable, but he nodded. You did the right thing by coming here. Let's make sure you and the baby are both safe and well, okay? The nurses exchanged glances as Dr. Hardy gently took the baby from my arms to examine him, his movements careful and professional. I could feel the tension in the room, the weight of the questions everyone was too afraid to ask. He's healthy, Dr. Hardy said at last, glancing back at me with a reassuring smile. And you look all right too. But Miriam, do you remember anything at all? About the baby? Or about anyone who might have left him with you? I shook my head, fighting back tears. No. I don't remember anything except a woman. She told me to come here. Dr. Hardy's expression turned thoughtful. A woman, you say? Do you remember what she looked like? I closed my eyes, grasping at fragments of memory, but all I could recall was the faintest whisper of a voice, one that echoed somewhere deep in my mind. Just then, the older nurse, whom I'd heard called Nurse Nellie, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. It's all right, dear. We'll figure it out together. Dr. Hardy straightened up, his voice quiet but firm. Nurse Nellie, let's contact social services and perhaps the police too. My heart skipped a beat. The police? Had I done something wrong? Nurse Nellie must have sensed my fear because she crouched down next to me, her voice warm. Miriam, we're here to help you, okay? No one's in trouble. We just want to make sure you're safe and the baby too. Swallowing hard, I nodded, still feeling lost. Somewhere deep inside, a seed of dread had taken root, though I couldn't quite name it. But as I watched Dr. Hardy and Nurse Nellie exchange a worried glance, I knew that whatever had brought me here, it was only the beginning. The baby lay quiet in Dr. Hardy's arms, his small face peaceful as the doctor carried him into the examination room. I trailed behind, clutching the edge of my shirt, heart pounding. The nurses had asked me to sit down, but I couldn't bear to be away from him, even though I couldn't explain why. My head buzzed with fragments of memory, pieces that didn't quite fit. Inside, Nurse Nellie was setting up equipment, her face pale but determined. She gave me a quick, gentle smile. Miriam, sweetheart, we're just going to make sure the baby is healthy, okay? Would you like to stay nearby? I nodded, relief washing over me. I edged closer, watching as Dr. Hardy carefully unwrapped the baby from the thin blanket, examining his tiny hands, his feet, the softness of his head. Does he have a name? Nurse Nellie asked gently, glancing over her shoulder at me. A name? My mind went blank. Somehow, it felt important. I whispered the first name that came to me, though I didn't know why. Hamza. Dr. Hardy looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but he nodded. All right, Hamza it is. His voice softened, a faint smile appearing as he turned back to the baby. A few moments passed, filled with the quiet clicks of machines and the soft hum of monitors. But then Dr. Hardy frowned, a hint of tension crossing his face. Nurse Nellie noticed and leaned in. Is something wrong? He hesitated, his voice barely audible. He seems malnourished, but it's strange. Almost like he hasn't been fed properly for days. His words were calm, but the weight of them settled over the room. My heart thudded. Days? How could that be? I had woken up with him just hours ago. As if sensing my confusion, Dr. Hardy placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Miriam, do you remember anything? Anything at all about who might have given him to you? I opened my mouth, but only fragments came out. A woman, she said, come here. But I don't remember her face. Nurse Nellie's eyes softened, but there was worry there too. You're safe here, Miriam. And so is Hamza. We'll figure this out, I promise. At that moment, another nurse entered the room, her face tight with urgency. Dr. Hardy, social services is on their way. And they asked if we should notify the police. My stomach twisted, panic bubbling up inside me. The police? I whispered, my voice breaking. Dr. Hardy knelt down, his voice calm and steady. It's just a precaution, Miriam. No one's in trouble. But we need to understand what happened, where Hamza came from and why you're here. He straightened up, exchanging a quick look with Nurse Nellie. A silent understanding passed between them, one that only deepened my unease. I didn't know why, but something told me that whatever they would uncover wasn't going to be simple or safe. Social worker Molly entered the room with a calm presence, her gentle smile easing some of my fears. She sat beside me, her voice low and warm. Miriam, I'm here to help you, okay? You don't have to be scared. She glanced at baby Hamza, now resting in a bassinet nearby, then back at me. Can we talk for a little while? I swallowed, nodding though my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Molly leaned forward, her gaze steady. Do you remember who asked you to bring the baby here? I hesitated, my mind a foggy mess. There was a woman. I don't remember her face, but she was whispering. Told me to go to the hospital. She said we'd be safe here. Molly's expression softened, but a flicker of something else. Worry, maybe, passed across her face. She glanced at Dr. Hardy, who stood by the doorway, watching us closely. It's okay, Miriam, she said, her voice gentle but persistent. You're doing great. Was this woman someone you knew? I shook my head, trying to fight back tears. I think so, but I can't remember exactly. A moment of silence hung between us, heavy and tense. I glanced at Hamza, feeling a strange pull to protect him, though I didn't even understand why. Molly must have noticed, because she placed a comforting hand on my arm. You're safe now, Miriam. Both of you are. I took a shaky breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. My stepfather, he wouldn't be happy if he knew I was here. He'd get angry. Dr. Hardy's eyes narrowed, and Molly's hand tightened around mine. Miriam, you can tell me anything. I promise I'll keep you safe, Molly assured me, her voice soft but determined. The room felt cold, each word heavy with an unspoken weight. I wanted to believe her, but a part of me, the part that knew how angry my stepfather could get, felt paralyzed. Molly's expression turned serious. Miriam, if there's anything happening at home, we need to know, so we can help you. Do you understand? My voice was barely a whisper. He doesn't like it when I talk to other people. Molly and Dr. Hardy exchanged a look, one filled with a mix of concern and urgency. Molly turned back to me, her voice gentle yet firm. Thank you for telling me, Miriam. I'm going to make sure you're safe, all right? I nodded, feeling a small glimmer of relief, though fear still knotted my stomach. Molly gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, but the way she looked at Dr. Hardy told me that this was far from over. Dr. Hardy led me down a corridor to a small examination room, his face calm but eyes sharply focused. He motioned for me to sit on the edge of the bed, and I sank down, feeling a strange mix of relief and fear twisting inside me. A few nurses bustled nearby, but one paused, glancing between Dr. Hardy and me with an unreadable expression. "All right, Miriam," Dr. Hardy said gently, crouching to meet my eyes. "We need to make sure both you and Hamza are healthy. It'll only take a few minutes, I promise." I nodded, glancing over at baby Hamza, who was sleeping soundly in a nearby bassinet. Dr. Hardy started checking my pulse, his touch firm but gentle. Then he lifted a stethoscope, pausing for a moment. "Is it okay if I listen to your heart?" he asked, his voice softer now. I nodded again, heart racing. As he moved closer, I heard footsteps outside, and the door opened slightly. Detective Cooper entered, his gaze unwavering as he took in the scene. He didn't smile, but he gave me a small nod. "I just need a word with you, doctor," he said, signaling for Dr. Hardy to step aside. The doctor looked at me, then back at the detective before nodding and stepping out of the room. I could hear muffled voices in the hallway, Cooper's low and tense. A fragment of their conversation reached my ears. Stepfather's background. Immediate action needed. I swallowed hard, anxiety bubbling up in my chest. Suddenly, Molly appeared at the doorway, her face full of warmth, but with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. She sat beside me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Miriam, some people are looking into what's going on at home," she said softly. "They're just making sure you're safe." "Are they going to talk to him?" My voice shook slightly. Molly squeezed my shoulder gently. "Yes, they're going to ask him some questions. But right now, our focus is making sure you and Hamza are okay." Just then, Dr. Hardy returned, looking at me with a reassuring smile as he picked up a clipboard. "All right, Miriam, let's finish this up." He completed the examination, checking my reflexes and asking simple questions. With every question he asked, though, I sensed a deeper concern in his gaze. After a moment, Detective Cooper re-entered, his expression unreadable. "Miriam, we're going to make sure you're safe from now on," he said, his voice steady, though there was a hard edge to it. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something new, hope, perhaps. The hospital room felt different now. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm patterns across the floor, illuminating the small bassinet where baby Hamza lay peacefully. I sat in the chair beside him, a stack of colorful toys beside me that Mrs. Atkins had brought. It was surreal, this small oasis of normalcy amidst the chaos. "Miriam?" A voice broke my reverie. It was Molly, entering with a gentle smile. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, I think," I replied, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. "Hamza is so quiet. He's not like I expected." Molly knelt beside me, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "He's lucky to have you, you know. You saved him by coming here." Her gaze drifted toward the window, and I could see her mind racing with thoughts of the investigations underway. "The police are working on your case. They're taking it very seriously." Just then Mrs. Atkins arrived, her presence a soothing balm. "Good morning, sweet girl. How's my little prince?" she cooed, peering into the bassinet and smiling down at Hamza. He stirred slightly, and I felt a swell of pride. "Can we keep him?" I asked suddenly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is that allowed?" Mrs. Atkins exchanged a glance with Molly. "Well, we'll take it one step at a time, but it's possible. As long as you're safe, we'll find a way." I couldn't help but feel a spark of joy. For the first time, I'd imagined a future. A future where Hamza and I could live without fear. Just then, the door swung open and Detective Cooper walked in, his face serious. "Miriam, can I talk to you for a moment?" His tone was calm but urgent. My heart raced as he gestured for me to follow him into the hallway. The air felt electric with tension. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach churning. "There's been a development," he said, his voice lowered. "We're trying to gather hard evidence to arrest your stepfather, and we've uncovered evidence that he's been involved in some troubling activities beyond what we initially suspected." "What do you mean?" My voice trembled. Cooper took a breath, steadying himself. He had connections that suggest this is bigger than just a family matter. "We need your help, Miriam. You're the key to unraveling this." Suddenly, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. "What do you need me to do?" "Just tell us everything you remember," he said firmly. "You can help us put a stop to this." I nodded, determination surging within me. I had faced so much already. I wouldn't back down now. As we returned to the room, I caught a glimpse of Hamza, sleeping soundly. I would do this for him. As I began to recount everything, the weight of my past started to lift, replaced by a newfound resolve. Later, as I settled back into the chair beside Hamza, I realized that my life was changing forever. I could feel the walls of fear crumbling around me, making space for hope and possibility. But then the door creaked open, and I turned to see a shadowy figure in the doorway, my stepfather. His eyes were wild, desperation etched on his face. "Miriam," he shouted, and my heart dropped. Before I could react, he lunged toward us, but Detective Cooper appeared behind him, grabbing his arm and holding him back. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, determination in his eyes. As they wrestled, I clutched Hamza closer, fear mixing with a fierce sense of protectiveness. This was my new beginning, and I would fight to keep it. I could feel the tension thick in the air, the battle between the past and my future unfolding before me, and for the first time I felt truly alive. A lot of evidence was gathered and my stepfather was arrested. I don't know anything about the fate of my mother. They say that she ran away from my stepfather abroad, and I never saw him again. Hamza and I began to live with Mrs. Atkins, who took care of us with great love, as if we were her relatives.